We certainly live in the most technologically advanced time in human history right now. And a lot of people think that this also means right now is the best time to be alive. This, unfortunately, is far from the case, as you will soon see. But let's first take a moment to appreciate the wonders of modern technology. You can have any delicious meal of your choice delivered to your doorstep at a moment's notice. You have access to the entire human history of knowledge and information available to you in a click of a button. You can move just about anywhere you want, apply to hundreds of jobs from the comfort of your own home. Hell, you can even work from home entirely now. All thanks to the wonders of modern technology. But wait a minute. Why is everything I just mentioned actually harder now than ever? You can apply to hundreds of jobs, but no one responds. You can order food to your house in a click of a button, but it's gotten way too expensive to do so. You can spend hours watching educational videos and learning valuable information online, and yet it never seems to get you anywhere. Why is it that everything that should have gotten easier with technology has actually gotten harder? What is this paradox? The short answer is because while yes, you have access to all these things, so does everyone else. In the past, you were just competing against people in your own city. Now, you're literally competing against all 8 billion people in the world. Technology may have made information and accessibility 10 times easier, but at the same time, it's made competition a million times harder. This is just one of many ways we're about to explore where technology has overall done more harm than good. But wait a second here. You're a YouTuber. Technology has allowed you to have the ultimate dream job, where you can just sit at home and make videos all day. Are you a massive hypocrite for now, complaining about technology? Someone always comments something of this nature whenever I talk about technology and modern society in this negative light. And believe me, I am self-aware enough to understand the irony of all this. In fact, I've actually deeply pondered this myself for a very long time, which is actually what led to the inspiration of this video. Why is it that despite all the ways technology has improved my life on the surface level, my life doesn't really feel like it's easier now than it was 20 years ago? We recently got monetized here on YouTube thanks to the wonderful support of all of you. I'll be quite candid with you and share how much we made this last month. Our total ad revenue for the month of October was 485 euros. Not great money, but not nothing either. Because I run this YouTube channel with a friend, we split the total pay 50-50, meaning I personally made about 242 euros this month, which is about $250 when you convert it to USD. This number seemed strangely familiar to me for some reason. I almost had a déjà vu moment when I first saw it, and later I realized why. About 23 years ago, when I was an 11-year-old middle schooler, I got my very first job delivering newspapers in the summer. How much do you think I made doing that? You guessed it, the exact same $250 a month. Keep in mind, I was literally a child back then, who had just finished elementary school. I had no degrees, no qualifications, no experience. Not even a high school diploma, hell, not even a middle school diploma. The funny thing is, I wouldn't be able to get that same job today as a 34-year-old adult, because technology has completely phased that job out, along with countless other decent careers that were viable in the past. Newspapers have completely died out now as the internet and technology has allowed people to just browse the news on the internet. And after I thought about this, I realized just how many more decent career paths that modern technology pushed me out of. For example, I've traveled a lot and learned to speak 4 languages proficiently during my travels. 20 years ago, this skill alone would have easily landed me a very decent middle-class job as a translator or interpreter. Today, Google Translate can do that way better than any human could hope to, and it's only going to get worse with AI and ChatGPT able to speak foreign languages now too. So while yes, technology has enabled me to be a YouTuber now, it first pushed me out of so many decent middle-class jobs, which forced me to adapt in the first place. And all this just to make the same monthly pay that I made as an 11-year-old child. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about being a YouTuber. I realize it's become a dream job today that many people want to do. I'm just pointing out a simple reality that modern technology has done at least as much harm as it's done good. Now, a common counterargument to this point, and quite frankly a stupid one, is that although technology eliminates jobs, it also creates jobs. Therefore, things should theoretically even out, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is perhaps the most idiotic, simple-minded boomer logic ever. Saying technology eliminates jobs but also creates jobs is a bit like saying eating 5,000 calories of junk food will also slightly boost your metabolism. If you create one job and eliminate 1 million, technically you've both created and eliminated jobs. But this is obviously far from the whole story. For example, self-driving cars are set to replace taxi drivers in the next few years. It only takes a handful of engineers and programmers to replace the jobs of millions of drivers around the world. It clearly eliminates a lot more jobs than it creates. Competition. In the beginning, I briefly touched on how much more competitive everything is now, and it's worth doing a deeper dive into this, as a lot of people aren't aware just how insanely competitive even normal jobs are now. Boomers will often gaslight you by saying, "You have it easier than ever," as these days, you can just apply for any job with a simple click of a button. But let's explore this a bit more. The first thing you'll see when you go to LinkedIn or any job application website is that every job lists absolute insane, unrealistic expectations, even for quote-unquote entry-level jobs, paying $10 to $15 per hour. We kind of all already know this and experience this, so I won't continue on beating this dead horse. But if we scroll down a bit, we see something way more sinister than that. Under the extensive list of unrealistic and absurd job expectations, we will see everyone who has currently already applied for the job, and you will almost always see hundreds, if not thousands, of existing applications all competing against you. We all know how daunting this can be, especially if you're a young person going through your first job searching experience. It feels impossible and pointless to even bother making a resume or CV at this point, as you know it's going to just get buried under a sea of another 1,000 applications anyways. Just in case you think I'm exaggerating, here's a real post from a real person with 15 years of job experience in tech that I found recently.
Applied for 1,200 jobs in and around the tech field last year. 15 years of experience on my resume. Nothing. In 2019, I got a job within a month after just 10 applications. Don't let anyone lie to you and say, this is a perfect economy. Shit's fucked right now, and no one's talking about the material changes needed to our system to make things sustainable in the future.
This is a perfect example of the whole point of this video. To be clear, I'm not saying that technology hasn't had some benefits. Of course it has. What I am saying, however, is that we've reached a tipping point where it's done more harm than good. Technology clearly made it possible for this guy to get a comfortable tech job instead of having to toil away in a factory. But then, technology subsequently made it impossible for him to get the very tech job he spent 15 years working in by making it accessible for literally all 8 billion people on Earth to compete for. Not only this, but it's also impossible for him to just go back and work in a factory even if he wanted to, as technology has replaced most of those jobs with machines. The Dark Ages. To give you an idea of just how much worse off we are now because of technology, let's take a time machine back to the medieval era, a time where you've probably been told that life was so awful and primitive, and that you should be so grateful you're living in the best time to be alive right now. I used to think this too until I got curious and started questioning the system. I did some actual research and discovered a bunch of shocking information. For one, medieval peasants only had to work about 150 days per year, compared to in the modern day where people are working around 260. This is because they had 30 to 50 days of religious holidays per year. And on top of that, they had entire winters off, as it was too cold to plant crops. And work back then was pretty much limited to farm work. Now, if you follow my channel, you'll know that I bring up this point pretty regularly, but I recently also discovered some shocking new information, and this is where things get really interesting. A young medieval peasant had better economic working conditions than Gen Z does today, by almost every metric across the board. Let's start with the fact that they were actually guaranteed a job, food, and shelter when they were young adults. You were guaranteed a job on your family farm when you were old enough to start working, and that was it. If you're an average Gen Z watching this right now, let me offer you a proposition. What if you were guaranteed a job when you became old enough to work? You never had to fill out a resume, a CV, never had to apply for a billion jobs and go through 50 bullshit interviews. If you were guaranteed 50 days off per year, on top of the entire 3 to 4 month winter season off. Oh, and by the way, you are guaranteed to keep this job for life and even pass it down for the next 10 generations if you want. I don't know about you, but that sounds a hell of a lot better than the dogshit modern economy and system we live in today. Of course, when I bring up this point, there's always boomers pushing back in the comments saying things like,
But technology has made life so much easier now, you spoiled brat.
back then they had wars and the Black Plague and people died at 30. Let's explore this a bit. If we look around the world at current day events, we can clearly see that war hasn't stopped. In fact, it's another perfect example of something that's gotten worse because of technology. I mean, seriously, what's worse? A knight with a metal sword and clunky chainmail armor? Or literal missiles and bombs dropping from the sky at a moment's notice? Let's talk about the Black Plague too. Do you think if a pandemic started today, that was as deadly and contagious as the Black Plague that we'd do any better of a job at containing it? Well, this is actually something that isn't even a hypothetical question. We have a real-life example in recent memory that I'm sure you all painfully remember all too well of a pandemic we had in our time as well. And did modern technology help us deal with it any better? Not really. If anything, it did the opposite, as modern transportation methods of airplanes and airports actually helped spread the virus exponentially faster. Sure, we might live longer lives, but with nearly half of young people depressed, anxious, hopeless, and even suicidal, a longer lifespan just means we spend more time depressed, anxious, and hopeless. It just means we spend more time working miserable jobs that we hate. It'd be one thing if we actually had more time to enjoy, but that's clearly not the case. The future of technology. I'm going to conclude this video on a more positive note. There's recently been a disturbing resurgence of the ideologies of Ted Kaczynski, better known as the Unabomber. The underlying theme of this ideology is essentially that technology is all bad and all evil. Believe it or not, I actually disagree with this. You see, I don't think the problem is technology in and of itself. In fact, I think technology could be and should be an uplifting force that improves all of our lives. The problem is that the boomers who are in charge of the world and the government are complete buffoons who don't understand technology and don't know how to manage it and utilize it in a way that would benefit us all. The AI revolution is coming soon. I'm sure you've all heard of it and are terrified of it by now. But why? This technology actually has incredible promise and potential. It could liberate us from having to work all together and allow us to live a life where we could spend our time pursuing our passions instead. Instead, we're sitting here worrying about how it's going to replace our jobs. And the reason we're so negative about this is because we've only known a world where the boomers have mismanaged and failed to create a world that properly adapts to new technological changes. But we can change that. There will come a day where the boomers age out and we will be the ones in charge. And it is absolutely imperative when that day comes that we figure out how to manage technology in a way where it actually serves its intended purpose of making our lives better.